introduce Kristen and her company and look forward to her remarks.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. And I do want to recognize the Chamber of Commerce and thank them for helping to support bringing Kristen to the table and for the presentation. They're cost sharing for her presentation today. So thanks to the Chamber for that partnership. Kristen, I had the pleasure of hearing Kristen speak at the Mountain Town Planners Conference last year. And it really resonated because as she'll describe, many communities are struggling with some of the same things that we are around tourism being key to our economy, and yet also putting pressure on our infrastructure, on our way of life, on those places that we love most. And so Kristen is with an organization called Cross Current Collective. She's the founder and CEO. And that organization is based out of Hood River, Oregon. But she's done a lot of work with mountain towns and other places, both in the Pacific Northwest and outside of that. So, Kristen, thank you for joining us today. And I'll turn it over to you. And please let me know if there's anything I can do to support you.
Okay, thanks. Well, we'll first start off. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Just to say hello and thank you for having me. It's great to be here. I love 8 a.m. presentations. No, I'm just kidding. It's 8 a.m. over here, 8:25. Okay, no, it's great. It gets the juices flowing. I'm going to go ahead and start the slideshow. So I'm a very visual learner, and also I'm not an expert with Teams. So let me just navigate this window over here and do this, and then share. Okay. Let me know if you can see that. Okay. You got it. Okay.
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay. So anyhow, thanks for having me. And yep, it was great to meet Delta last year in Bend at the Mountain Town and Resort Planners Conference. It's a conference I've been going to since I started my company, and just find it's incredible to be amongst all of the different towns and hearing their issues, and so many that really it's difficult to separate out really tourism from, the rest of the community. They're just really one and the same in some of these places. So anyway, thanks for inviting me. I'll share what I can, and also try to stick within the time frame that Delta shared. And but I'm also available to answer questions or support any other dialogue after for a little bit. So my background, just so you kind of know where I'm coming from, I'm actually from Southeast Alaska. So I grew up in a tourism based economy in Juneau, which is a cruise ship based economy, but also, outdoor recreation and all the things. And I really started my career in this space as a guide. So I worked as a glacier guide for quite a few years up on one of the ice fields near Juneau, if you've ever been there. And then after college, I started whitewater guiding. And it was really through this passion of sharing other places with other people, and really kind of circulating amongst different tourism economies as I would move from guiding from one place to another, where I really became passionate about this, I would say, everything around balance. How do we balance, our community livability with visitation? It's so powerful to travel. It's so powerful to be a traveler, but how do you really create community systems that can harness it without, damaging what's there? And so this is a little bit about my background. I was hired on with Travel Oregon and helped create their destination development department over about 13 years. And then just really decided I love Oregon. So here are some Oregon examples in my presentation, but I was really ready to kind of expand my realm to really encompass more of the West. So I've been working with Cross Current, I guess, for the last 5 years. And I wanted to mention a couple things about the company. This is our team. So it's just me here today, but we have a really core group of awesome women predominantly, but we also work with a large network of expertise really around the globe. And we support communities by sort of plug and playing this expertise. You can learn more about it on our website. The name Cross Current comes from my background of guiding. And the reason I wanted to mention it is that you know, in a community, it's really easy to kind of get pushed around by the forces, you know, by the water flowing. And it's really up to us to create those systems and those venues for communities to engage and to discuss and to really create that momentum. And if you're a river runner, which it sounds like some of you are, thinking about sort of how do you point positive across this moving current so you're not just pushed into those obstacles, so you can really move around obstacles effectively and in concert with one another. So I'm really passionate about the concept. I'm also passionate about rivers, and I love Idaho rivers. How do you know when your destination strategy is needed? So these are just a few kind of signs and symptoms that we hear in communities in the West, or see, I guess, witness. Regular letters to the editor complaining about tourism, and this can come in obviously many different forms. Service businesses are often shut down for many weeks out of the year. In some communities, sometimes it's just days of the week, but they're not really necessarily able to operate, you know, year round. And you'll hear residents say things like, this place just doesn't feel like it used to. And, you know, lots of subtext to that. The trailhead is always so crowded. I don't even go there anymore, right? Or the lake, it's so crowded. I don't go there. You know, I hear this all the time where I live. I don't even go on the weekends anymore. I don't go in the summer anymore. So locals are feeling a little bit pushed out. There's so many Airbnbs popping up in my neighborhood. And, you know, all the complaints that can potentially go along with that as well. And then this one, you know, kind of spans the high use destinations to low use, but everyone just goes to the, you know, X fill in the blank, but they don't go anywhere else. Some communities are so small, they say they only stop at the gas station, but in other places you have some kind of iconic thing that everyone's drawn to, and they're going there and they're hitting that really hard and causing a lot of degradation, but they're really not aware of all the other things to do. So these are some of the, you know, just kind of more clear symptoms that we see in communities in the West. So a little bit of background here. So if I sound professory, it's just because I love to share this content. I also teach a bit for the George Washington University. And so some of these slides are from a course we do in sustainable destination management. But really, if you, and I'll make this very quick, so don't worry, I won't go on long. But if you kind of look back over the course of time, this is a chart that shows the increase in travel. This is really international tourism, or tourist arrivals as they call them, over time. And so you can really see the increase in travel and tourism, and it's sort of at an increment or an exponential rate since really the 1950s. And it's not been even around the globe, but it's definitely been a huge increase with the growth of leisure time and the growth of expendable income. Sorry. So in the early 2000s, a term sort of started coming to the forefront for those of us working in this space, which is over-tourism. And there was even a book written at that time. And really this global rising awareness that there's certain places around the world that are experiencing just this overwhelming visitation at times without any ability to kind of control the conversation or sort of handle that visitation. And then we had 2020, COVID hit. And what happened was overnight, visitation really came to a screeching halt. And this is a chart from the UN World Tourism Organization. And you can kind of see the drop in both receipts and international arrivals, you know, both down around 60 to 70% across the globe. So it was really just this phenomena that no one had really experienced since the growth of travel. And what that did was really shut down these places that were experiencing this high volume of visitation. To the point where we were having these conversations about what should tourism look like in my community, right? And in some places it was longer than others. And what we found in the West was that this moment where the communities got quiet for a minute only lasted a very short period of time, because what we found was that those communities that are high in outdoor recreation amenities really provided this space for people to play during the pandemic. So we had these shorter bumps, and this is looking specifically at your southwestern region in Idaho. You can see the dip in 2020 that came back. And in fact, since I do this presentation all over the West, I would say this is the most shallow dip I've seen in a long time. Most communities were hit really hard, you guys. Seem to really depend on visiting friends and family and relatives coming from across the West. And so your dip was really pretty small during the pandemic. So that's kind of interesting. But where we're at right now is that globally travel and tourism really came back to pre-pandemic levels in 2024. And that really equates to, you know, this 1.4 billion international tourist arrivals globally last year. It contributed to 10% of global GDP and 1 in 12 jobs around the world. So one thing is certain, you know, tourism economy is diffuse, but it employs a lot of people in all kinds of different jobs. So we've seen just this rapid rebound, and the good news is, you know, the economic receipts and the employment levels, we're back up to the 4th largest global employer as an industry now. And sorry, last slide on the global stuff, but Americas are just barely floating below pre-pandemic levels. But what this ended up looking like in our Western communities, here's Bend, just a funny photo, but you know, our places were packed again, right? So it went from, oh my gosh, how do we shape tourism? What should this look like? How do we plan for when tourists come back? To all of a sudden overnight, we just kind of you know, had these issues crop right back up, in some places, you know, worse than before. And so I actually didn't include these slides, but there's been a global conversation and a global analysis of destination management and marketing organizations across the world. And the conversation has really shifted from how do we, you heard this with the McCall Chamber presentation too, but how do we shift from simply marketing our destinations to a more sophisticated marketing, as McCall Chamber pointed out, but also how do we shift the conversation and really start to align what's going on in our communities and the needs of our local residents and the issues that are happening in our communities. So one of the big trends has been resident sentiment surveys. This is from one we did with Big Sky in 2023, where really, you know, taking the time to listen to locals, both local residents, excuse me, and stakeholders in your tourism economy, but to really find out not just about their complaints, but about what do they need to see different in their community if you're going to continue on with your you know, robust tourism economy. This is aside from a resident sentiment survey out of Bend, where, you know, perceptions were mostly negative across kind of all of the different impact areas, except for the economic impact, which was viewed as favorable. So, you know, there's really just this transformational pressure in tourism. It's at an all-time high. People love to travel. We have leisure time. We have money. I just checked the American sentiment survey just before jumping on this meeting, and it's still American sentiment to travel is still just as high as ever. Nothing has really changed, even in the last many months. So there's really just this moment in time for us to shape our communities, you know, and be proactive about our approaches. So how do we move forward? So I'm going to share a little bit about sort of destination strategies and sort of some of the key components to them and what we see as effective components for these things. So the first one, and I'm sorry for this terrible photo. I need to put in some of my own travel photos, but this is the Amalfi Coast, and I don't know if anyone in the room, I can only see 4 of you, but if anyone's been to this part of the world, but does anyone even know the name of a community in Italy that's on the Amalfi Coast? Yeah, and I don't know if anyone's been there. Maybe this is a bad example, but the idea of a destination mindset. So most, I would say 99% of visitors don't care if they're going to a city jurisdiction, a county jurisdiction, or Forest Service unit versus a BLM unit versus a national park unit. They really don't care. They just want to get to the experience and to the amenity and enjoy the place without thinking a lot about the boundaries. And so the more we can start to shift our mindset to be thinking as a destination and rather than a jurisdiction, the better off we're going to be in these type of conversations. The other thing is around developing leadership and considering your destination audiences. So for, I would say, the large majority of the last many decades, the destination marketing organization conversation has really just focused on visitors. Who's our visitor? Who's our target market? Who are we bringing? And as we start to shift from a marketing to more of a management conversation, we really need to start to think about those stakeholders within our community, within the tourism ecosystem, and I'll explain what I mean by that here in the next slide. And then how do we cultivate the leadership to really start to coordinate across these different interests, because it shouldn't be all on the shoulders of a destination organization. And the tourism ecosystem, and it really is kind of all the different agencies and organizations and private sector businesses that contribute to the visitor experience. So this is going to look different depending on your community composition. But every single one of these, entities listed on the screen really plays some key role in the visitor experience. So it's oftentimes what I find is a community kind of deep into their thinking around tourism planning, they may not be thinking about coordinating with the adjacent lands that are really maybe the driving force for why people are coming to their town. So bringing in those land managers is really important. Bringing in the nonprofits that might be actually doing the work, maybe the trail building work, maybe it's watershed enhancement work, and really starting to connect the dots across this ecosystem as part of the strategy. And this is a slide we'd love to share, but this is often how things look within that tourism ecosystem when we are first invited in or first having a conversation with the community, which is that many of those players in that ecosystem are working super hard, but they have their head down and they might just be working in different directions without maybe the time or understanding of what everyone else in the system is doing. So a really good destination management planning process helps to create space and time for conversations for everyone in that ecosystem to come together, talk about what future success looks like, and then start to figure out how resources can align. And not in a super controlled way, but if you can spend enough time talking about what that future end goal should look like, it allows everyone in the ecosystem to kind of adjust and change leadership, change budgets, kind of adjust accordingly. And we've seen this now for happen successfully in many destinations. I'll talk about a few of them at the end. And also be mindful of time. See, I can go long, so I'll be quick. I would just say, another piece of the destination management planning that is really important is to really think about the direction of change. So I talked about the vision and the description of what the future looks like, but really as an overarching, what is the direction you want to head? And we do something called scenario planning, which is really powerful. This is from Big Sky, Montana, but these axes look different in every community in terms of what are kind of the big future splitters, what are they grappling with, and to have that community conversation to help figure out which direction, how much and how far do we want to go. And it's really about figuring out both the direction of change and then the speed of change that you want to move at. I think more or less the last thing I want to share here on destination strategies is that we tend to help shape strategies that fit pretty neatly within kind of the vernacular of most destination marketing organizations as they're evolving into more of a management space. But it's important to consider the leadership and the management component. So management is a word used broadly, but it's also a specific realm of activities that need to be tackled, which is coordinating amongst all those multiple agencies and organizations to really assess, collect data, and manage those visitor impacts. There's experience optimization, or in some places they call it destination development, but it's really that active improving the visitor experience. And I'll share some examples of that. But how do you really use visitor experience development as a tool, just like you use destination marketing as a tool? How can you develop new experiences, maybe off the beaten path, to help diffuse impact and help people stay longer in your community? And then destination stewardship is a key component. How are you building in the stewardship of those assets so that as visitors, come and visit over time, you're protecting both, your environmental assets, but also, your cultural assets, and maybe even finding ways to sort of bring those to the forefront and celebrate what's there. I won't go into this in much detail, but this is sort of how we view it, where the leadership and the management is really that foundation. And you really have to have that component in place in order to do these other facets really well. I'm going to skip over a few things here. And I would just say one of the foundational components that we like to talk about is this concept of sustainable tourism. So I'm sure this is nothing new to anyone in the West, but it's this idea of how do we balance, the environmental impacts, the cultural impacts, and the economic impacts. And we will often work with communities to really talk about what does that look like. So if you're talking about a sustainable economy, how do you close the loop, help visitors really purchase local products, help them connect with, local artisans, local growers, keep those dollars local, to really increase that local economic stability. We look at the environment now. Oftentimes in the US, lots of great structures are already in place for conservation, but how do we help visitors really, protect those same spaces, treat them well? And I know you have an awesome campaign you're starting out on with responsible tourism, so things like that can really help. And then with our communities and our culture, this is a tricky one, but how do you shape your economy in ways that help improve livability? And, one of those biggest strategies is really asking, what is it that needs to change? What do we need to protect? How do we need to build our spaces so we can all share this place? So key components: leadership team, community values, 10-year vision of success. If you are involved in different planning efforts, this won't look too different. And I would just say the main difference with a destination management strategy really is about setting up that management and that leadership team. So really that vision of success, moving forward together, having a solid roadmap, and having, really the community aligned around a common set of priority projects. Okay, I'm going to skip over a few slides because I want to get to the examples. Boop. This slide is just representative of, if you're doing this well, you'll start to connect the dots and you'll create a really resilient tourism ecosystem. So Delta, do you mind just giving me a time check? I think I have a few more minutes.
Yes, I think you're fine.
I'm fine.
Thank
Okay.
you, Kristen.
All right.
Thanks for checking.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I don't want to, I never want to run long and ramble, but I will just share a few different examples in these different spaces that I think from, my conversations with Delta and doing a little bit of online research, some of these might be relevant to things you might be considering or thinking about in your community. But I'll start with the first one, which is intentional collaboration. So I mentioned that leadership and management structure is one of the key sort of foundational components. Right here, where I am, the Columbia River Gorge, which is a bi-state region between Oregon and Washington, I'm sure you're familiar with it, decided after a destination management community engagement process to really form a destination management entity. This is their purpose statement, which is optimizing the positive impacts of the visitor economy. They have identified 8 different impact areas that they're working on, and I'll explain the structure here in just a moment. Now it's it's an impact network is how it's been designed. And so essentially it convenes and facilitates action teams that work on these different issues, and essentially make progress over time amongst the different stakeholders that participate. And this is just an image of kind of their structure, which is that they do have a nonprofit structure. They have a network director, a typical nonprofit board, but what they do is do these convenings with action teams that really involve stakeholders from a broader set of the region, whether they're, you know, sort of actively engaged or periodically engaged. And they do that through a series of convenings, both for the entirety of the industry, you know, twice a year, and then these smaller action teams that really work on projects. And I'll talk about some of the outcomes from that in another section. In Jackson Hole, you might have heard there's quite a few of these communities, and I'm sure that's why you're interested, but Jackson Hole has done a sustainable destination management planning process with my colleagues at George Washington and George Washington University, excuse me. And out of it, they set up a destination stewardship council, is what they call theirs, and it's Jackson Hole and Teton County. And I had the opportunity to work with them over the past, well, roughly year and a half to help them set up their new destination management organization. And it's still in the works, but you can see the diversity of types of people that sit on that council. They meet monthly, and they are focused on 8 different impact areas, not too dissimilar to the Columbia River Gorge. But I will say they've done an amazing job just because of their resource base. They have a full-time staff person that not only convenes the council, but also convenes their action teams. And they have a phenomenal industry website if you want to go to their website and actually dig in. They keep their destination management plan updated with their progress, which is really cool. They're very lucky to have a well-resourced council, but it is that council that helps facilitate these broader outcomes in the community, you know, across the National Park Service, across the county, across the city, and they can really tackle, more complex issues. In Big Sky, we help them set up the Destination Stewardship Collaborative, and they're often running on a number of different really cool projects there. So active transportation, and in fact, actually, sorry, I should tie that back to Big Sky. One of the things I was most excited about was their ambition to create an active transportation plan for their community and their surrounding region. So that's one of their action teams, and they've made a ton of progress in the last year, but this is one of the areas that we see communities very interested in moving the needle on, which is the transportation conversation. It's, you know, different in every region, but these are often, you know, longer term strategies, but they can make a real difference with both regards to community livability and the visitor experience. So, and this is a photo from Aspen. Aspen has probably, I would love to do a show of hands, but I can't see you very well, but I'm curious who's been there. They have an incredible active transportation system that's been in the development, in the works for decades. But at this point, you know, they have a robust integration of community bike share, the micro transit, shuttles that you can take. And then, of course, if you've ever used their bus, they have 5-minute headways on buses that run, you know, all throughout the winter with warmers and chains. And anyway, it's just really impressive. Someone from Alaska that doesn't see that great of transit up in Alaska in the wintertime. It's really impressive. But they have something that they started back actually in the 80s, which is this transit to Trailhead. And this is one of the oldest existing lines where you can actually take a bus and get up to a really popular trailhead. And that's helped them address a number of issues, with parking and congestion, et cetera. And you can see at the bottom, it's a real collaboration between the city, the Forest Service, Snowmass, the Transit Authority, et cetera. So these type of projects, they can take quite some time, but they're well worth the investment. In the Gorge, when they started in 2017, they only had one leg of transit running between two destinations on the Washington side. And now, 8 years later, they have a full transit system running around Mount Hood, around the Gorge, much faster headways, and they also sell a gorge pass so visitors can hop on and kind of find their way around. With regards to responsible visitor education, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. It sounds like you're well on your way. There's numerous responsible visitor communication campaigns. I would say, I don't think enough research has been done to find out if they work, but we do see them, working anecdotally in some places. This one's from Big Sky. This is from Leavenworth, Washington. They have an awesome campaign called Give a Schnitzel. Yeah, it's one of my favorites. I know, so cute. So cute. And then here's McCall. I'm gonna add you to my list. But yes, I think measurement and conversations annually. We have one here in the Gorge as well, where the group of people that do all the communications get together on a regular basis. Another component of this is trail ambassador programs, and I know Leavenworth has one, Snoqualmie outside of Seattle has one, and this is really to engage volunteers to help meet visitors when they come and really get them the right information before they head out into the backcountry, maybe to help diffuse impact. Anyhow, these can be incredibly powerful. Regenerative Mindset, this is a Norwegian hiking system with 550 huts, and just this idea of creating experiences that also help people, help the locals be inspired about just going out into their backyard. So they really focus on local marketing, and they have a really amazing sustainability ethic. But that's Norway. We expect that of Norway. Another kind of trend we see is just tour operators creating regenerative travel experiences, which is helping to get volunteer visitors out into spaces to help with restoration efforts, or maybe it's invasive species removal. But this takes concerted effort for tour operators to work with local nonprofits, but it can be incredibly rewarding and a great way to help visitors give back. Last example here is Bandon Dunes on the Oregon coast. It's a world-renowned golf course. They decided to dedicate 2 of their courses to a nonprofit or a fund that they set up, which is the Bandon Dunes Charitable Foundation. And they're now bringing in $2.5 million per year. I just spoke with the foundation director, and they're giving money out to the community, conservation, economy. But part of that is actually building the visitor infrastructure through trail systems and events, and helping to sort of take some of the pressures off some of the highly visited places. But this is really rare that you see such philanthropy coming from the tourism industry itself. It's very cool. Okay, this is, I believe, the last category, and I'll move fairly quickly here. Visitor experience development. A major trend in the US is working on accessibility audits and making improvements to all kinds of infrastructure to ensure that no one is left behind, that that our spaces are welcoming to all different types of abilities and identities. And this is a little bit of work that was done here in the Gorge not too long ago with creating some guides. There's new organizations that have completely popped up in the last 5 years. This is Wheel of the World. And they are an organization that can come and help do audits, but then they basically bring all that content onto their platform so that anyone who's searching for these type of experiences can find them. We see lots of investments in trail systems, whether that's to completely develop a new system to create a new attraction, or whether that's somewhere like Whistler that really just, they develop more trails and higher density to kind of help to create less congestion, but also more interest in coming there. Things like Whitewater Parks in Bend. Smaller, more rural communities many of them are investing in dark skies initiatives and becoming recognized internationally for being dark skies communities, and taking that and promoting that. Food trails. So food is another big aspect that community organizations are working on to really help to connect local growers, wineries, breweries with visitors, whether that's directly or through restaurant and eating establishments. And immersive foodie experiences. That's, I think, maybe my last point here is just really visitors want the immersive experiences. They don't just want, to go into a regular restaurant. They want to go and experience how that food is grown and where it comes from and what do you do with it locally, and, hunting. How do you catch something and skin it? People are really interested in that stuff. So that's it. I think actually Delta might already have this handout, but we do have a small handout on building your tourism ecosystem if you want to grab that, or I can share it later. And I just want to say thank you. I'm really, happy to be here, and I'm sorry for going on a little longer than I think we planned. So I'll stop there.
I think that was great, Kristen. Thank you so much. And Mayor, I do think we have a couple more minutes if you have any questions of Kristen or others in the room have any clarifying questions.
Yeah, Kristen, thanks for being so concise and moving us along really well, but we do have time. This is a really important topic to the council, so let's take a little pause and ask if there's any questions or comments or anything you'd like to ask Kristen.
Yeah, I have a comment. Thank you, Kristen. That was really great. And, I think the thing that I came away with is, we've got the chamber that has revamped their marketing, their message, their marketing message and everything. But what your presentation is showing me that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, we've got to put in a lot of different, like infrastructure. I don't mean like roads or anything, but infrastructure into that plan in terms of, transportation planning. Marketing alone is not going to do it. And the other thing I'm taking away from that is that the communities that have built these destination management plans have a lot of human capital behind that to make that happen.
Right.
So, as far as us getting a destination management plan, I think we, when you mentioned when are you ready for it, I think we're ready for it. Maybe we should have been thinking about this, a few years back. Of course, with COVID, I don't think people anticipated, so many people coming out to rural areas, to get away from the crowds and everything. But it's, I think we need that. And my worry is just how as a community, how do we get how we're going to be able to manage getting the human capital necessary to really implement a plan. I know you don't have the answers to that now, but just a comment.
Yeah, I don't, but I do want to respond to something because this is something I've been observing and thinking about a lot, but it seems really easy. People are very eager and willing to come to the table when you start out on these processes, right? Often. I mean, some people might take a little more convincing than others, but people kind of recognize there's an issue and an opportunity. And so they're quick to come to the table. They are often awesome participants throughout the entire process. But the piece that I think communities miss is that there has to be an investment in the coordination of that human capital over time. And so thinking about that capacity in advance. So I just wanted to mention that you can't, put it on the shoulders of your chamber. You have to find that capacity. I mean, the capacity could be anywhere, but you do have to recognize that in order to sort of keep that human capital actively engaged and working towards things in new ways, you do have to invest in that convening or coordination capacity